o'clock. I'm letting Craig get all set here. Okay, it is 6 o'clock. I called the meeting to order. Kathy, roll call, please.
Mayor Chapman?
Here.
Councilmember Bean? Here. Councilmember Furby? Here. Councilmember Halverson? Here. Councilmember Scanlon?
Here.
You're all present and accounted for. Alrighty, moving on to approval of the agenda.
Your Honor, I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Okay, motion and support. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Agenda is adopted. All right, so the one and only thing we have, it is a presentation of findings from investigation on the area south of Division Street, south from the high school as of December 16, 2023.
And we're just gonna adjust our view here and share slides.
So there will be slides on the behind you and on both of those TVs. So if you need to maybe adjust yourself to see better, I know there are some residents here.
Okay, so good evening. On September 6th of this year, the council asked the city staff to provide a update on the investigation into anything we could determine related to sewer and groundwater infiltration of sewer, potential issues that might contribute to flooding of homes, sewage backups in homes, and things of the like. So this is up to yesterday's account of what we have found thus far. It is not complete. There's still things that we are looking at. There are some things that we can recommend we continue looking at with different strategies for looking at those. As we go through, there are some header slides for when we change sections, and when we change those sections, I'm going to call those out, and then the slide will flash to the actual next slide so we don't spend time on header slides. And so I've given you a moment to look at the agenda, but we will go through this. And a lot of it to start is background related to what we know about sewer infrastructure and where we're headed with some of our projects as well. So with that said, we'll begin. So the first section is going to be the brief overview of city priority efforts. And so we've had some discussion in the past on what our priorities should be for the city. This has been presented as part of our state of the city, and they are called lines of effort. Those are the things that we put our efforts towards in general terms. And for this presentation, the line of effort that we'll highlight is the orange one on the next slide, please, Jason. And so we're just calling out that we are in this line of effort. You can see what that says, and then we will move into the sewer project. So the sewer project is funded, and even as of today, our engineers with UPEA and the contractor are working out some additions and subtractions. As you're aware, we scoped everything on this map in our original request, and that was based on real data of real cost at the time we submitted. By the time we got through the process and funded, we were about 50% of actual costs with the economy shifts. So we are doing the rescoping of those to identify what will and will not be done. And then since then, we've also received notice that we are in the intended use funding for drinking water and $20 million of water. So we're also looking to see whether or not we can align sewer and water together along those lines and get that into the scoping as well. None of the areas will change other than it'll be in or out. Next slide, please. So looking at the question that was asked by the council, was any of this downtown area included in the sewer project? And the answer is no, none of the area down in downtown investigated area is in the sewer project. And you'll see within the investigation, the results indicate that the lines are newer and PVC and in good condition. So we'll have that for you in a little while, but that answers one of the major questions that was asked a couple times. Moving on to the next section, we'll just do a little bit of the stormwater. Again, stormwater is different than sewer and water in that it's harder to fund because it takes, in order to get a loan, you have to have a revenue generating, tax revenue generation, and we do not have a tax revenue generation for stormwater issues. So we must seek grant opportunities, which are very hard, and 100% grant opportunities are even more hard. And so we will have to figure out how that looks for the future. But we know we probably have at least $11 million worth of storm areas. There's areas that were just never even included in any stormwater project. Way back in the past, when developments were made, they thought the soil conditions didn't warrant storm, and now we find that there's areas that people's yards are flooded and other areas where storm sewer should be. So that's part of that $11 million. Next slide, please. Switching over to the drinking water, this is the new $20 million funding that we're working on this year to be executed in '24. And again, this is scoped as what should be included as our projected total of scope, and then where the final bids come in and the costs, we hope that we can do better than the 50% scope that we ended up with under the storm or under the sewer. Looking to the next slide, this is where you've asked us to look in that downtown area, and there are some potential for project area for water in this location, and that would ultimately likely result in some pavement, which will be part of the next discussion on roads. So next slide, please. And so when we look at roads, this is the road map that we've had. I'll call out that downtown area in the next slide. And in that downtown area, it is rated as a poor rating or failed or poor rating, which is about 39 miles of our 54 miles. And that poor rating results in the cost of projecting mill and overlay at about $500,000 a mile. So we have to do some calculations on the total effort that could be included based on what is included in the final water to tell you how much will be done, but we won't have that for at least 5 months. Okay, next slide, please. So we first wanted to make sure we located and understood where our sanitary sewer is. We wanted to look at our records, and we wanted to get in and do some televising. And when we say televising or scoping, they're synonymous for us. It's just terms that are used in the same capacity with us. It's a camera going through the system and taking photos and tracking with GPS where they're at in the line, so you can actually see where it's at. So the green lines on this picture here are the actual locations of the city sanitary sewer. That sanitary sewer was a combined sewer, which was then separated in 1982. So it used to be storm and sewer. Now it's sewer separate from storm. And when that happened, the old clay tile sewer system was replaced by PVC, and the storm sewer was replaced by concrete pipe, which is today's standard and is in good shape. So then we also looked at lateral connections. And when we talk about lateral connections, we mean anything that is coming off of perpendicular to the city actual main line, and generally laterals are connected to a home. And so when we say lateral lines, we are generally talking about those lines that are connected to a residential home, could be to a business in a business district, and other types of structures, but generally laterals mean connections from the home to the main line. And then as we look through these lines, we look to see what those conditions are that are maybe feeding in. So this camera can look, turn, pivot, and see up and down the main, but it can also look, pivot, and see up and down the laterals and give us some indication without actually going into the laterals of what might be occurring. And so you'll be seeing, and Bill will present some videos and camera shots of those things. But this is, what we're trying to get at and understanding is the foundational layout of the discussion's base. So from here on out, we'll be referring to this map as the area in question. It will widen out for portions, but generally we wanted to investigate whether or not these sewer lines have a infiltration, an impact, any kind of potential to generate sewage back into a residential, any kind of groundwater penetration, any kind of breaks or things of the like. So that's what we've been looking for. Next slide, please. So we have to contract with someone to do this, and a recognized leader in this service based out of Escanaba is Tunnel Vision Pipeline Services. They've been working with us for years. They've been working all across the UP and Marquette County. This slide just gives you some general idea of what they do, how they do it. Next slide, please. The next slide, I kind of highlighted a few spots, and you can take a moment or two to understand, but basically they're doing a pipe-specific evaluation, and that these result in some mapped assessments of the conditions of buried infrastructure. So basically, you don't have to dig anything up to look. You can do it while it's still in the ground and it doesn't cause extra disruption. And they are intended to identify issues or what might be contributing to problems or what the problems are, and help us to align and make decisions for what the project would be needed if something was wrong. That could be lines sagging from something, lines bulging, lines separating, lines cracked, lines broken, any of those kind of things are generally what we're looking for. And then we can also see tree roots growing through lines and other things. Sometimes lines are blocked. Whatever the condition may be, this is the way we can find it without digging up anything. Next slide, please. So we're going to start looking at what we have found along the residential area lateral lines. And I used the word generally earlier. The findings will indicate that not all of them are connected to residential homes, but are on residential lots. And so there'll be some where they are connected, some that are not connected. When I find that they are not connected, we use the terms orphaned or abandoned. It just means that they're laying in the ground and not connected to a home. Therefore, they've been orphaned from a home. And so those are just terms that we use, not meant to confuse anybody, but I want to make sure everybody understands when we say that, what we're talking about. Next slide, please. We looked at these homes in particular as some highlights. We looked at the entire neighborhood. We're still looking at the entire neighborhood. We're not separating ourselves from the neighborhood, but we wanted to bring out some highlights. Some of these homes were specifically addressed by residents in public comment at council meetings, and so we wanted to make sure that when they're here, and they are tonight, that they can see some of their conditions that were found. But to show you that we've investigated all of those, these are some conditions that we can use and call out and help you understand what we found. Next slide, please. So when I say residential lateral lines, I'm talking about those that we can say are connected to a home, but they might be identified as residential because we think they are, and then we might still discover that they've been abandoned, orphaned, or cut off in some way. That's part of the ongoing investigation, but I'm going to start turning this slide presentation over to Bill because he is going to be able to discuss and describe areas of the map, pictures that are on the map, and then also contribute with some video by sharing his screen on the projection for everyone to understand. So, Bill.
I'll show a couple examples before I show the video, but the first one that you're looking at right here is on the corner of East Superior and the alley. And what it is there must have been a house there at one time. And if you look at the picture on the right, that's the actual sewer lateral that's going into that lot. So it's not actually hooked up to any building or anything. Whether the building got torn down and not capped properly or whatever, or if the pipe might have broken in the yard. But you can see all the dirt that's coming into that pipe. Next slide. Here's another example. One lot just south of it, same example. You can see the dirt coming in through the pipe. So there's a lot of debris and a lot of water every time it rains. That's entering the sanitary system.
And that's one that's not capped as well.
Correct. So just to add some clarity there and make sure everybody understands what we're talking about. So when we have these pipes that are not connected, they're still in the ground, they're still underground, and they're laid where they were originally. No one's dug them up, no one's turned them. They're not tilted in any way, shape, form, unless Earth did it over time. But they're laying there with an opening, and they're collecting water, and they're pushing water and dirt, debris, I don't know what we want to call it, right? Because we haven't identified what's there, but it looks like muddy water, right? And so what you see is those lines we're spotting them on an empty vacant lot. They are collecting water, they are moving water and earth, and that is carrying into our city mainline sanitary sewer. So when we call out water infiltration, also known as I&I, some other industry terms, that's groundwater moving in, infiltrating the sanitary sewer, and all of that then goes to the treatment plant for treatment. And so when we were looking at the May 12th storm, this was a saturated area of town, along with many other areas of town, but this was a saturated area of town. The expectation is these pipes were probably full or near full and contributing to the amount of infiltration into the sanitary sewer, which we did notice a large volume of water in. The treatment plant asked us to divert, and we pulled a permit, and then we discharged sewer into storm to alleviate pressure on the system. So those all happened in that May timeline. These are contributors, 100% I&I. There's no connection to a home. Whatever water and soil or debris gets into that pipe is going straight into the sanitary sewer as infiltration. Okay, thanks, Bill.
So this is another example just south of that first one. There was another house in the vicinity, whether the house was torn down or whatever happened, but the sewer lateral, you can see the debris coming in again. Go to the next one. Next slide. And here's another example, same sewer line, main line. This one's on the west side of the line now. Another house was torn down, and you can still see the mud and debris that's coming into that pipe.
And this is another one that's not capped.
Yes, pretty sure it's not capped. I mean, you wouldn't get this type of debris any other way.
Okay.
Next slide. This is also one right before the manhole. Another house was torn down, and you can see the debris coming in on this manhole, or in on this lateral. And then the last slide, or the next slide. So this is one that I'm still working on. This is actually on Superior Street. It's not even a real tap. Somebody made their own tap onto the top of the pipe, and if you look really closely, you can see 2 bolts sticking through next to the pipe.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look closely, you can see all the water that's coming in on this. And this is during dry weather.
Mm-hmm.
Where was this one again?
It's on Superior Street, but I don't have a record of this tap existing. So somebody did this, and I don't have a record of it. So we'll probably end up having to dye a bunch of houses in the area, but we can't do it until we have the camera in the pipe. And then when we dye the houses with different colors, whatever color comes in there, that's the house that has this tap, which absolutely needs to be fixed.
So again, just to be clear, what we're saying is that there is a line that was installed somewhere in the vicinity of Superior Street that is carrying likely sewage, but also has been tapped in random way where you can see bolts coming through. But We don't know who installed it or when. It's not on any property record cards of the city as being an installation. That does not mean that they didn't draw a permit and have permission to do so, but we don't have record of that happening. But in order to trace this line, we use a dye method, and multiple colors, flush down multiple toilets or somewhere into the sanitary system at a similar time, and watch for the color, and whatever color hits this or colors hit this are connected to this line. So we can't even say this is abandoned or not abandoned at this point, but that is a future assessment that has to happen in order to figure out where this line is coming from or going to, other than we know it's hitting the main. So just want to we don't want questions about this. We want people to understand the data that we're giving. And so want to make sure that it's clear. So, Renell, did you have a question that needs to be answered?
I'll show you again.
I was just
Oh, yeah, I want to make sure.
locate.
Nope, that's fine. I just want to make sure that we're clear, because if it's not clear to you guys, then we're not clear to
I
the
just
public
wanted
and
to find
everybody
out where
else
the
either. So,
alleyway was
okay,
on the sub shots.
okay.
Let me get to the Zoom real quick. And Jason, can you share my screen? Okay, it's gonna take me just a second to get this going.
Yeah, you gotta share your screen.
Oh, there we go.
And so what Bill is doing is Bill has got his files that he's able to access as a public record. Our public works folks are able to walk around with their tablets when they're doing work in the city. They have this data at their fingertips. Bill's doing it from a laptop, but they have a nice, hard, rugged duty laptop that they can pull up this kind of data right in their hands while they're on the street. In the past, we had a record that was, 2 seats wide and long, and you had to flip pages, and some of them were brittle and 100 years old. It's all been digitized as part of all of the upgrades that we've done over the last few years. So, Bill.
Okay, so this is our GIS map of the area. I wanted to show you one video first before I get into the other one, but this is the line that is in question, the one that has the most problems. So this line up here is a contributory to it. And if you look at this video right here, this is what a sewer pipe is supposed to look like. Nice, clean, and everything. Takes me a second to get this. Takes a minute for it to start. So this is the line that's in question. And if you can notice, you notice all the mud and debris on this pipe throughout the whole thing. Keep in mind that this pipe, we had to clean it before we could even videotape it. They tried to use a sewer camera, and the sewer camera wouldn't even go through there. So this has been jetted already.
What's the diameter of that now?
8-inch. And I knew this was gonna happen.
Yeah, generally our mains are 8-inch, and generally laterals are 4-inch.
It's easier when you're in the office with 2 big screens.
I hear you there. Totally.
So we can actually travel down the pipe. You can see all the joints are good. The pipe is new. There's no separations, no cracks, no roots, no nothing.
You could sell this to VR.
And so as you're looking at this, we've evaluated 1,664 linear feet in this neighborhood of pipe doing exactly this. The camera going down through the entire length and looking for any kind of joint issues, separations, roots, other penetrations, things that aren't supposed to happen. And, this kind of, where Bill's indicated what a clean, normal sewer pipe looks like, and then what you see here, and having to jet this, when he says the word jet, we run high-pressure water through the system in order to clean it, so to speak, right? It's like taking a hose, if you got a garden hose, and sometimes you have little spray, you don't want to kill your plants, so you spray light water on it, and then when you want to wash your car, you turn the setting to a harder jet. This is like almost fire hose jet kind of jetting when we go down this and cleaning, and you still have all of this dirt and debris mark on the pipe. So just trying to give you some perspective of what we
Bill,
are indicating.
you said you guys had to clean this before you could even shoot in there? How do you clean those? Anyway, I'm just curious.
With the big Vector truck.
Oh, okay.
Isn't that the jetting that you just described?
So, yeah, so the Vector has a jet on
Oh.
it, and they can shoot water into the pipe at one end and have it flushing down as they're going.
Perfect.
And they can, push that water down at high pressure, and then make sure it's clearing the area that we're going to
Just trying to be
investigate.
educated, that's all.
Nope, and that's what we want. We want everybody to understand what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do
An
it.
intrusion on the
So
right.
so this is the first lateral that we come to. This is actually a worm that's coming out of their sewer lateral. So the lateral, there's obviously debris or something coming in, so their lateral has to be broken of some way or shape or form. But just so that you know, what we do is we can take the sewer camera, or they take the sewer camera, they go down it, and you can tell where you are in the pipe by this number right over here. And then what we can do,
What size pipe is this one, 8-inch too?
yep. It's not gonna let me do it
So
easily.
this matches a little bit to the pictures that were shown on the previous slides too, where if you see, it looks like two pipes running together. So that's what you're seeing, Mr. Scanlon, when you asked if that's an intrusion. What was hanging down was an earthworm, probably associated with dirt. When dirt's infiltrating the system, that usually means a break, a crack, or some sort of penetration into, and that was coming from a lateral line.
Were there any possibilities that it was a joint that it may have been coming through? Okay.
These are
It's-
pushed together.
That's
All
at the
PVC
joint.
is pushed together with a rubber gasket. It doesn't leak.
Oh,
They'd
okay.
put, the pipe would have to be sheared, or you'd have, or it wasn't installed properly, but I've watched this video, I've watched all of these videos, and every one of the joints is intact. If you turn the camera, which I'll do in a minute, you can actually look up and see
Okay.
2-3 feet of the lateral. But anyway, what you can do is you take that number that I just showed you, and then we have these lateral cards for each one of the houses. Like, this is gonna be the first house, and it's 49 feet from the manhole. So I can match up every single lateral to the pipe that I just showed you.
Okay.
And so on board on this camera is technology that is essentially grabbing its place in space and time using global information systems, or GIS, to say you are here. And it's pretty darn accurate. It's the technology we use for surveying. It's the technology we use for everything. Your phone tracking you, getting you maps down the highway. That's all GIS. And so this is on board the
One
camera.
thing that I would like to, if I may, for Todd and some of the people in the audience, I'm gonna ask them what house that is. And that's not to point out anybody's house or to try and lay blame, or, this is all completely neutral right now. It's not about blame, it's not about, and another thing is who owns those vacant lots? That'll be asked. Again, it's not to lay blame or do any more trouble. We're all working to get these things fixed for you. So don't get upset when I say whose house is it, and they answer, because that's gonna be a big question if I know where our problems are, okay?
Yep. And I was gonna kind of say the same thing.
So that being said, Bill, can you align an address with that, where the earthworm's hanging?
That's 410 Division,
410 Third?
Division, right on the main road.
That's yours? Yeah.
Convert.
Yeah, and to your point, Mr. Scanlon, we are
14.49.
just trying to identify
Convert
what is
14.49
occurring
meters to
and present it based on space and time where is it occurring? Because we can't fix it if we don't know where it's broken.
Okay.
Okay, so the next one down the line, this is actually 412 Division, so it's on Division, but down the alley. So their line comes out of the back of the house. And you can tell by the amount of debris and water that's coming out of this one. It's actually stained the pipe. There's so much stuff that has been coming out of this one.
And whose house is this one?
The address is 412.
So,
So
yeah,
vaguely,
our goal, Mr. Mayor, is to just try to keep addresses. I mean, we can absolutely give you the individual's name from records, but for the sake of this presentation,
Say, oh, that's my
for
own,
this,
that's fine.
yeah,
but
right.
We
but-
don't
but-
need to know.
Right, and we're not trying to do that from our end. We can absolutely pin a name if you need it and contact information if you wanted to talk to
Yeah.
the resident.
I think
But
I
for the
would.
sake of presentation, we want to give addresses
Okay.
only if we
Yeah.
can.
Okay, yeah, I would like that info.
So, I mean, I can go down there and I can show you every one of these.
Well,
Or
go back to the lateral for 412, Bill, please. And what was your comment on that one?
you can actually see the water. It's been leaking so much that it's actually stained the inside of the
Oh,
pipe.
okay, gotcha.
And all of this debris that's in here, that's mud.
Yeah, that's a lot.
When I first started this, I was expecting to see a broken pipe somewhere with the amount of debris and everything.
Mhm.
I've literally watched every part of this video, all of this whole area. There isn't a single pipe that is broken on the main line or where the laterals are connected. A lot of it is the sewer laterals coming out of the houses or into these vacant lots.
And we haven't went up the laterals yet.
When I normally do one of these things, I expect to find like maybe one house, one lot that is contributing. Never in my wildest dreams did I think there was, I think at one time I was counting 19 different lots that have laterals going to them, that I think have laterals that are contributing. Again, I'm not done doing my investigative work, but this is what you wanted at this meeting. And I can tell you that 75% certainty that all of these are not connected properly. There's
And-
more work to be done.
And have you guys went through the laterals yet?
No,
on
that's the homeowners.
So to that question, the first directive is to determine whether or not the city was contributing to a problem raised by residents. As we investigate and we determine that the city line is intact, and as we investigate and we find these contributing lines, we can then bring back to you decision for how you want to address this. But again, going back to initial of what a lateral line is. A lateral line is generally a line connected from the homeowner to the main, for which ownership is usually the homeowner on a residential lot. And so we can look into the connections, we can look up the connections. We should not be going into the connection without the homeowner's permission or as a participation with them. Because if, say, the camera rolled up there and broke something, did we break it? Was it broken before we got there? Where does that come from? So we do not enter into the private property side of things right now. But that is something that we can discuss and you can direct as you see fit. But we did not, for the sake of this presentation, have anything that looks up into the private laterals.
And again, I want to reiterate that I'll use my friend Mrs. Sylvester. If we go over in her neighborhood and we know her house is a problem, I'm not in a position to say that the Sylvesters now have a problem on their hands and the city walks away by any means. That's not where, and I think council will agree. What we're doing is we're looking at what's it gonna take in Kathy's case to correct the problems that we may or may not find. You know, there's a million things that have happened here long before any of us were on council. There's things that have happened in modern times that might not have happened to the best ability of the city. Things like, well, they put new main in and they didn't offer help to the homeowners, we'll check your laterals while we're open. Or things like, I mean, there's dozens of issues that are gonna come to fruition here, come to realization as we go through. So I don't wanna start a storm over, well, all they said at the council meeting was, I own this, and that's not what we're saying.
No, yeah, and thank you for that clarification, Mr. Cannon. What I want to say is that we're following a systematic approach of first analyzing the city main, because the question was, is the city contributing or causing problems for these residents? And so we do it from what we know is our ownership first, and then we will find what we are listing, our findings are calling them contributing. Right? There are opportunities where infiltration is occurring. We don't know to what level or scale either because we've not investigated that. But to Mr. Mayor's question is, did we go into those laterals? No, not yet. Could we help and work with residents to analyze those conditions and situations? Absolutely. We have some identified potential opportunities. And so we can talk about those as we go through this presentation. But yes, this is simply to say what we have and have not done, and that there is a lot to discover as as Bill pointed out, we thought maybe we'd find a handful, and we're into 2 hands and 2 feet full, all right? And so there's a lot going on down there, but so far, the camera and video footage has indicated that the main is in good condition with some indications of contributing factors, which is what we have to continue on to from this point.
And do we have more lateral video, Bill?
Yeah, there's one, I'll give you an example of some more stuff. And I can show you any of the houses in particular, but I mean, to me, I don't care what house it is. I'm just telling you that what I see in the main. If you want to know the house number, yeah, I can tell you, but it takes a little work-up, but it's not the point. I mean, the point is there's a lot of problems in this area. We can get towards the end of this one.
Oh, you're going in the direction of full, correct?
I am going, no, this one is actually opposite.
Okay,
Yep,
because the laterals were going the wrong way.
Yep.
If that was the case.
yep. So it's coming up. And again, you can see the amount of mud. So when the mud gets in there and then we get these high rain events, it's actually blocking the main to the point where it is gonna start backing up into the houses. But again, this is during dry weather, and this is the amount of mud that's coming out of the laterals.
A lot of them, or is that one of the worst?
No, there's a lot. I mean, it's almost all of the laterals have something coming in from them.
Oh, is there anything that
So,
at the waste? You'll have to figure out what I'm saying. We're sending a ton of mud
yes,
to wastewater treatment
Yes.
plant. Do they detect that? Does
yes.
that-
So they are actually in, I think it was last fall, they actually lowered a Bobcat skid steer in to clean out their grit chamber. It was so bad, to clean out all the debris that's going in there. Whether it's our debris, township or Nagani, it's irrelevant. It's debris that they got to do, and then that cost is going to get transferred over to the citizens. This lateral right here, it's got water coming down it, which shouldn't be abnormal, but the video guy actually sat there for 20 minutes and it never stopped. So then I decided to go to the videotape that we have from 5 years ago, and it's the same water just pouring into this thing.
Wow.
And this is actually a lateral that is in use, so it's broken somewhere between the home and the main line,
Okay.
and it's contributing water
But
to.
again, now dye would be used there.
No, I actually know this one for a fact. I know it's coming from that house. There's nothing else in that area.
So the dye,
I'm talking about determining if it's groundwater or house water.
No, that, the dye would only be if I don't know the lateral, whose lateral it is.
Just
That's
for
how I find it
detection,
out.
okay.
Yeah.
How can you tell that's groundwater and not potable water?
One way is to go to the house and tell them to stop running everything. But when a house is running for 20 minutes like
Right.
this, not only this time, but 5 years previous, it's the same amount of flow coming in there. It's
And
groundwater.
They would notice an increase in their water bill.
There's another slide that's coming that is some more investigative work that you can do, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, but to your point, Mr. Scanlon, what we do is we identify that there's water, and then we try to figure out what is causing that. We can, turn off all water sources in a home and see if it's still flowing.
Right.
If it's time, right, people are gonna notice if they've got 20 minutes of running water and their stuff shut off.
Right,
Because the bill will
the
go
bill
up,
is
everything's gonna go up.
yeah.
Yeah,
So we are working off of indicators, right? We're not testing the water to determine whether it's groundwater or drinking water. And the dye is simply to trace a line, meaning that in that one condition where we said we don't know how it got installed, we have no record of it being installed, we don't know which house it's connected to, that's tracing. We have to find out what's doing what, but that's what the dye is used for in that case.
So I get another lateral down the line, a vacant lot that is got debris coming in it. I can show you more videos if you guys want, but it's the same thing over and over, both of these. I have lateral cards that show whose house it is. There's,
so you're estimating 19
yeah,
problems.
yep, 19 so far.
19 contributing circumstances. We don't know what is the cause or the condition. And so we don't want to lay a pin yet. As we say, that one looks like groundwater. We might find it's something else. But we know that it's contributing to infiltration in the sanitary sewer system onto the city main. But we have more investigation to do to figure out what that is and what the solution is to stopping that. But we're just doing indicators as we try to analyze the entire system. 1,664 feet doesn't feel like it's a lot when you walk 1,664 feet. But when you're scoping it and looking for cracks and water infiltration and dirt and having to clean it every time you go to do another camera work, it takes time, it takes energy, and it takes investigation.
What is that there, Bill?
These are just rocks and debris that are coming
Really
up, coming down the laterals.
Wow.
This
So
is,
imagine a line that was once hooked to a home, and they raised that home, meaning they demoed that home, and they left the ground condition and just took the foundation above surface. Well, those pipes may or may not have gotten a cap on them. It would look, or indicators indicate that they were not capped and that they're letting water get in and carry water or debris down the line. So when you say, how did a rock get in? Well, if you have an open pipe and water's got enough force at times when there's a big heavy rainstorm or there's a lot of groundwater, that will carry stones, depending on the size, down a pipe. But that would indicate, if you see stones, that would indicate an uncapped and open line. Again, indicators, we don't know. We haven't found the opening. We haven't found where that rock came from, but we have indicators that there must have been a place where that rock could get through, because it's not coming through a toilet. You don't imagine anybody's flushing rocks down their toilet and getting it into a sanitary sewer. Could it be? Yeah, I guess it could. Right? But, well, no, that indicators, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure we're talking about what indications we're finding, and as we do investigation, to lead us to potential solutions for the future.
so this is actually a lateral that I can tell you with complete certainty that this one is capped properly. And you can see there's nothing ever been flowing through this pipe. There's actually 3 of them in a row, very close to each other. I know this one was a house that was torn down in a lot, and it was done properly. This one right here, you can actually see the staining again. So this is groundwater coming in. And this one that so far, this is their old line. They decided to not use this line. Something must have happened where it broke or something. And the homeowner, rather than replacing the whole line, which went all the way down their lot, cut across the sidewalk and then went to the pipe, they actually came out of their house and went straight to the manhole. And I have the records of that. So yeah, they fixed their problem, but now that sewer lateral is contributing to this problem again. So it's something that has to be dug up or, and we'll show you a slide.
For informational purposes, the one you referred to that you're sure is capped.
Yep.
The clean ones. We should record that the vacant lot at this address has been properly capped.
Yeah, all of this information is going to be entered into the GIS. So if you go and click on a person's property, we have lateral cards for each one of those properties. Eventually, we're going to be doing the thaw reports. So if your house has been thawed over and over, you're going to get it on that GIS. This is something that, it's a living document that is, hopefully people, when I'm gone, will be able to pull up stuff and they won't have to do all this searching through 9 million books and videos. But it'll all be in one place.
Yeah, and just trying to help understand what that means, right? So for your point, for anybody that doesn't understand, when we put something into our record system, into a GIS shapefile, imagine it as the library of all things infrastructure in a computer.
Right.
But just like going to the library, you can file that house's information in a specific location by file naming structure and then pull all things associated with that house. So the picture of that lateral is one file. The video is a file. The record cards that are available from past records having been scanned and placed into that. And anytime there's new work or a visit to that home and there's a condition investigated, the guys have those tablets. They can take pictures, they can upload files, and they can put that right onto that property record, where in the past you had to go find the file in the library and hand carry looking for stuff.
And we're continuing to do that for the vacant.
All things within the city as we go
Every parcel
through.
has an ID and
And
it's
this is-
associated to the ID.
This is also part of a lot of the grant work that we've had. We had the drinking water assessment grants, we've had storm grants, we've had the sewer grant. All of those things required us to trace the lines, identify where things are. The water lines right now, our guys are out getting ready to paint valves blue so that the engineers can come out and mark them on the GIS. They did an airplane flyover of all of our city. They had big X's running around town. And so they've been doing all of these things and storing them into our database. And it doesn't matter whether it's a vacant lot or whether it's a home. If it's touching or near infrastructure, it's going into this section of our storage.
So this is the one that I was just telling you about. So this line broke or they had damage or something, trees grew in it or whatever. But they stopped using this line and this is the line that they now use. So they got a direct line that goes right into the sewer. So this one right here is going through a big lot. It's an indented lot. So obviously debris has been going in there and being indented. You'll actually drive by there after a storm and it looks like a lake. And you go by the next day and that lake is gone. Lakes don't evaporate that fast. It went somewhere. And now we know that it's entering the sewer system.
And you can imagine, Mr. Scanlon, you indicated that over time, things change, right? So you put a new sewer line in, well, that new sewer line may take a new route. Or, if as a homeowner, I found that there's a new sewer line closer to me and it won't cost me as much to fix this. Instead of going 90 feet, I can go 40 feet and save myself 50 feet of cost. That's what you see in those property record cards. There was a condition that caused a change. It was probably a cost-effective change for the homeowner in this case. And then now we also see a condition of indicating infiltration.
If that was done in modern times, if that was my house, and I said, you know what, we can shoot here, would I not be required to terminate
Yeah, you are.
sewer?
You are, and nowadays, anybody that does a sewer, whether it's disconnecting or if they tear down a house, either I have to go visit and inspect the site, or they'll send me videos or pictures, and we either require you to cement it, great stuff, foam it, and then put a fern coat over it. And a fern coat is a rubber cap. Preferably you do it where the PVC line is, not the clay tile in the yard.
Right.
So you have to find the PVC, because anytime they do one of these sewer jobs, it's not required that the city does that lateral. The city does those laterals just so that nobody has to dig up that road again. So there, anytime there's a sewer project, we always do a PVC sewer line
Yeah.
to the opposite side of the sidewalk so that you don't have to do this.
But we don't necessarily know if these are all uncapped or if the line is destroyed or something like that. Or do we know?
We have indicators, right? And we have not got a complete knowledge, but when we go further in this and we talk about capping or plugging a line, if it's been abandoned or orphaned, we would be talking about capping it where it connects to the main, not trying to find the whole line and figure out what the problem is of that line. We would say it's not connected to a house. We don't have to make it a solid, full connection. We just need to come there, cut that, plug it, and be done. Whatever's left in the ground can stay in the ground. It can hold water all at once, as long as it's not contributing and infiltrating into the storm sewer. When it's a lateral connected to a home and needs to be open for residential service, now you're talking about a full line that has to be investigated to make sure and or repaired or whatever is necessary in order to keep that line solid, because that needs to be used, not a broken or I guess just not working, not functional line, right? So
Is there a way for these to be capped at the
It's coming.
joint? Oh, it is.
Yep.
Oh,
and that's what we're talking about, is at the joint.
okay.
Yes, on abandoned and orphaned.
So
Okay.
unless you guys want to watch some more of these, it's the same thing over and over. Craig can continue with his, the slide.
Okay, so we're now on slide 31.
You got it.
Jason, can you reshare the slides for us? And slide 31, thank you. So what we're looking at here is connected in use, right? Those lateral lines used by residential customers, which indicators suggest there's significant leaks. Leaks are a myriad of different types of problems. These are always considered a resident-owned lateral. We believe there's approximately 10 right now that look connected that may be contributing infiltration of dirt and sludge. That number's up plus or minus number, right? Because we're looking at indicators. And there's ways to fix those depending on the condition. So I'm gonna try to keep it simple, but if you have a tube and the tube is supposed to be whole in a straight line, then that is a good line. If it's completely solid and made of the right material for today's modern technology, which is PVC for sewer, then a solid PVC should not allow any breaks or infiltration. If there's a break, it's how. And so there's lengths of PVC that are connected and slid together, and they could break at the joints, they can come apart, and they call that separating. They could break and crack, and the joint could break. They could break and have holes or punctures or fractures in the pipe. So all of those things are breaks. Where that pipe is mostly in a straight line, it does not have a sag, a bow, a flex, or a separation, or is not completely collapsed, then the most affordable option is what we call slip lining or cured in place pipe. They're one and the same. Basically, you pull a plastic sleeve through a pipe. The plastic gets unfurled. The material that's stuck between two pieces of plastic is superheated, superconducted, and it turns it into a hard composite like a fiberglass, and it takes the shape of the last pipe minus some millimeters of new material. But it completely makes that pipe brand new. And it right now, I think the warranty is 10 years with a expected life expectancy of 100 years. And they've been doing it in Germany for years. I think they're over 70 of known condition of life. And so we would, in those cases, if we could investigate a homeowner's lateral lines, we would recommend cured in place pipe as the most affordable option for
Do we know
those.
how much that costs?
We do. We do. We're going to go down to it in just a second. And so when that is not an option, right, you're into different problems. It might be that a section of the line could be replaced. It might be the whole line needs to be replaced. And each of those has costs. And each of those requires you to dig and discover. And if you have clay pipe, you can slip line a clay pipe.
Okay.
You can slip line an asphalt pipe. You can slip line any kind of pipe that they can keep a straight line and no sag, no belly, no flex, no separation. But if it's one of those other types like terracotta, it's also very brittle. So when you try to repair a section, it's likely going to break and keep breaking until you find a really solid piece. But the likelihood is the rest of it's going to break over time. We would recommend that they replace the whole pipe at that point. But that's a licensed contractor's consult with the homeowner, making a decision what's right for the homeowner, right? But we can help make recommendations. So when you look at the cost, we've given some ideas. An assumed 4-inch diameter pipe has a minimum placement of 20 feet. And the cost for mobilization for a single event is almost $1,500 just to get them to your house. And then it's $165 a linear foot.
So at the minimum, it's $4,750 each. At minimum, if those totals are correct, right?
I didn't, what's 20 times 165
Yeah, that's what I
plus
was
one
doing.
plus 1,400.
was
I mean, I
doing
didn't do that math, right? But I mean, and then if there's anything short of the minimum, their minimum cost is $2,750. So somebody could get in for $2,750 if they're under 20
wow.
feet of line, but there's not many lines that are connected to the city main that are under 20 feet.
Okay.
So it's a calculation based on what their actual is. And you could look at that property record card that Bill uses as an example, where they once had 90 feet. That could be their problem, but there could be a closer 40-foot solution. And now they got a 40-foot line to replace, not 90, but they got to
gotcha.
cap off the 90-foot line, put a new 40-foot line in, and their number changes,
All right,
right? So we
yeah.
can't necessarily give you a individual cost by home right now,
Okay.
because every condition has to be analyzed. But
Yeah.
there are ways in
Scratch
which
my figures
there
then,
are
yeah.
ways in which we can work with contractors and do bulk rate purchasing and contracting. And so if, people typically watch when my neighbor gets a driveway put in and I need a new driveway, my best pricing is to go contact that guy the day he's going to get ready to do my neighbor's driveway, because they can bring the material to 2 homes instead of 1 individually, and I get a better rate.
Okay.
So we can do that kind of rate pricing with any homeowner, with our contractors, or recommend contractors that they can go with that are reputable. But the dig and cap is estimated between about $8,000 to $10,000 per resident.
So 152,000 to 190,000 approximately.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking full dig and
Yep.
cap,
That's
dig and
what it
repair,
is
right?
for
So,
all of it, yeah.
so it's not a cheap adventure, and it's certainly not something that a resident is prepared to take on, and generally, they don't have insurance.
What you gentlemen are doing is exactly what I asked the audience not to do.
What's that?
Talk about money. We're not at a point, I don't think.
No, we're talking about what the estimated cost is, and it's in, right, and it's in
That's
this.
the part
Oh.
we're not there. Why give people undue stress? Because some of these people are gonna go home thinking, I heard $5,000, I heard $10,000, $9,000.
Okay.
That's
My
irrelevant,
apologies,
totally irrelevant.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, it's in the presentation, and it was asked a question, so I answered the direct question. We can move on to the next slide. So, ancillary to infiltrations, we had Todd had stood up several times to let us know that he was having trouble with his deck. And so this is his deck. And so, again, this goes back to your question, Ms. Scanlon, of what was past and what's current as far as codes and what's allowable and not allowable in past and future. And in the case where this deck was falling from a home, there's no footings, and well, there were no visible to us, and that's what the picture is. So I'm not, okay, so I apologize. I don't have any visual reference to it.
No judgments being made.
I'm not doing that. I'm saying that, and we don't do that investigation,
No, and I
right?
think this one
And-
probably
and-
should have been investigated further if we're putting it into the slideshow, so.
Well,
I guess.
indicators that we're talking about as part of our investigation, and specifically, we were asked to look at the deck. So we did. And so there could be conditions where this, if it's not properly footed, if it is, it is. If it's not,
Well,
that's not, we don't do
again,
codes.
But if we looked at the deck and we didn't communicate or figure out if there were footings in there, it shouldn't even be in the slideshow like this. That's my point.
So we don't do building codes. The county does building codes, and we coordinated with the county to look at the indicator of whether there was or not, and they indicate, you asked us to look at this in condition, and we reported on this condition.
I think in the case of 409 South Third, we are going to further investigate, and if there's a tie, and I'm only guessing, I'm only shooting for the stars, if there's a tie between the abandoned lot, lateral, and the earth erosion, that's the connection. If the construction was wrong from somebody long before Todd was with us, then it's out of our hands. But if a lateral on the adjoining lot where a building was raised, whether it's improperly or on a slide or during the night one time, whatever, and that pipe sucking earth during a bad storm caused a problem, that's a different problem. So it for the sake of, we can go right by it, but the manager's right, we asked to look at it. The investigation continues as to, is there failure of that deck in the footings because of the sewer problem? And when we come to that point, then we can look at if we're able to help him, if his insurance comes around, or what we're gonna do at that time. But I guess I would like to just move on to the next slide, please, if you would.
Okay. So at 319 East Johnson Street, the homeowner was visited. Bill went in the house with them, talked to them, and one of their major complaints was large volumes of water in their home after a rainstorm, and they have a sump pump to help manage that. The sump pump was actually connected to the sewer, and so it was pumping groundwater from the basement into the sanitary sewer, which is not by code allowed. And also we see how the flow is coming from the wall to the center, or to the right of the picture, and that is penetration through the foundational wall. And so some conversation, I believe the homeowner's already fixed the sump pump.
I don't know if he's fixing it, but he's
going to be fixing the sump pump issue.
Yep.
And so we have been making some contacts with some of those homeowners and working on some of these things as well. You know, water is getting in clearly through the foundational wall. Is that the only place? I don't know, but it's a pretty good sized hole in that picture. And the resident indicated that he did see water coming through there.
Mm-hmm.
So
this is what people call a Michigan basement. And in the old days, you built your walls.
Mm-hmm.
And then depending on if you had money, you either left the floor mud, or if you had the money, you poured cement. And nowadays that doesn't work, because that seam right there is where water is going to come out anytime you have the ground is super saturated. So it's a construction issue.
Yep.
But he understands that he's got to fix this.
Yeah, looks like my basement.
My basement.
It looked like my old
grandma's,
one.
yep. And some people have 20-foot boulders in their basement, like my grandma did.
That's what we had in
I've-
our house.
I've been in a house where it's still got log timbers to hold up the support poles, but anyway, this is, you know, another, again, these are conditions that we've
Right.
brought out as, there's a theme of these types of problems, right? We wouldn't call it a Michigan basement if it didn't have a theme across the state of Michigan. But it's a theme, right? And so that's what we're looking at when it comes to indicators. So next slide, please. We're gonna go over some of the potential, right? And all we're doing here is pointing out where we're evaluating process and procedure of the city against conditions caused by natural disasters, time, construction standard changes, realignment of infrastructure, whatever the condition is, right? There's two things that come to discussion when it comes to City Ordinance 12700 related to the sanitary sewer. We just identify what those two are, and where our process and procedure is black and white, the condition, the environmental set that we're exploring is not black and white. And so you'll be, as a council, you'll be asked to evaluate, what does our ordinance say and what are we trying to remedy? So that's what that slide is. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about a couple of recommendations that, could be easily done, could be possibly done, could be further evaluated over time. So when we have determined that there's no record of cause or history, meaning that the city didn't realign something or there wasn't a specific event, then we have to evaluate whether or not that's a city or a private resident condition. When there is something that is known, as Mr. Scanlon was trying to allude to, if there's a condition that we identified where the abandoned lateral line is contributing to a deck failure, then we can look at, there's a condition, right? There was something that happened, we have it, we know that it happened and when and where. We can link those two things and make a different kind of decision. For uncapped lateral lines, that are completely not aligned, we need to close that gap. We have to get that. So as you were alluding to, Mr. Mayor, we need to get to those joints and cap them and close them, stop the infiltration. So how do you get there, when you get there, and who pays, that's all to be decided by you guys as a decision based on the conditions and evaluation.
I do have a question relevant to this one here. Didn't the city inspect these when the buildings were torn down? Or are we not, are we supposed to inspect them?
That's way before my time.
I understand that, right.
I don't know what the practice was back then.
Okay.
There's not what the practice is now.
Because I mean, if
there's not a person on staff that would have been here when this had happened. And so, you're right, that could be a question that is worth exploring, or it could be that it wasn't a conditional requirement and the standard changed.
Well, I guess we should.
Or it could be that the line was capped up by the house, but then the clay tile between that cap and the main is busted, which is very, very likely.
And to some extent, that's irrelevant
Right.
for the most part.
Yeah, it is. I'll let him go through with the other slides, but I'll bring up another point in a minute.
Yeah, and so all we're saying is there's conditions we have to explore, right? And that they may have a course of action, as Bill said, it could have been capped, could have been done, and it could have been terracotta and all collapsed. And now here it is, still not capped where it should have been at the main. And so we got to solve the at the main problem and cap it and close it. So what are some options? Options are looking at ways in which we can take immediate action and then explore cost as an action, right? The council could say, you know what, because we don't want to manage the infiltration, we don't want to keep having issues in this area, we can use sewer funds, cap these lines, and then upon further investigation, if we find it's the condition where it was capped, but it collapsed naturally, it happened, maybe somebody should have been aware, but no real ownership, maybe the city absorbs that cost as part of a decision. If we say, you know what, nope, this is probably a homeowner problem, then we could then maybe offer some sort of a prorated rate payback to that, but we can still pay for it and get it up. No upfront cost to a homeowner, and figure out how to solve the problem. That's what we're here for first, right? Is to stop the infiltration, stop the water problem, figure out how we manage it. And an option is to consolidate it, put it under a single contract. The city pays up front and determines whether or not there's a liability or cost share down the line. But all of those things are decisions for the council to make. Orphaned and abandoned are not the same as connected and active to a home, and that should be part of the consideration, and we're just recommending that you take that into consideration. We often want to recommend the slip liner and cured in place pipe over a new pipe. We think that if there's an opportunity, we can do it. So we got, I'm on slide 40 right now. Sorry. And so, you know, this is the stuff that will be before you at some point for decision. There might be an easy decision tonight and say, hey, let's use sewer funds and cap these as we find them, as long as we know that they are empty and abandoned lines that are contributing to infiltration. We can get the contract established and start closing those infiltrations off, and then continue to investigate and assign cost to the responsible party at a later date, whatever that is.
If I might, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about. I was gonna kind of wait, but as long as we're on that particular subject, I guess I would like to find out what it would take to identify the column abandoned lines that are causing the problems, the unoccupied lots. And can we, I'm probably wrong on this, can we cut blacktop and use the Vector?
There's another way coming.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I think that's one action we can take tonight.
Well, no, and I think we're getting there.
Yeah,
I think you'll see the answers coming.
Okay.
But let's just get to that point. So look at that, the next slide, unknown lateral lines, course of action, right? So again, we're looking, at some point, we have to determine ownership, right? But right now, we're not looking for that. Right now, we're looking for stop infiltration, close the sucking chest wound, so to speak, in a military term, but this constant extra flow of water into our sanitary system, we can absorb that cost in the sewer fund and stop that, and then determine those other things. So we've talked about that one at Superior Street. As long as we can validate the historical records and validate that there is no actual use, we don't want to cut anybody's house off, we should be able to identify how many, where at, and establish a contract on pretty short order to get those done. And given that we're doing it at the main, and given that you saw Bill's comment was that the video indicated that the joints were all good, that's the best scenario for us, because that can be a tunnel vision coming in and doing it and not digging up a neighborhood and not having to do anything but get in there electronically and mechanically and seal and close those lines off through that
So they
inline
kind of
service.
Orthoscopically,
Yes.
for lack of a better word.
Perfect term for me, thank you. Orthoscopically, they can get in there and do it without penetrating. And so we've come up with some of those costs for you on slide 43. So they call this remotely operated vehicle. We've called it a camera, we've called it a scoping, we've called it a televising, but using a remote operated vehicle. They go down and they actually will perform a line plugging. Imagine sliding something over cap and then shrinking it in a way that you stuff something in so tight that it can't move, and then you shrink the outer side of it. It's solid and sealed, and it's the technology that is allowed by code. It seals and plugs that. So we call it plugging, capping. Those are interchangeable terms, but they would have a one-time mobilization charge if we do a group project, or they would have an each mobilization charge if you do it individually. And for an 8-inch or a 4-inch lateral plug, you're looking at $2,630 plus one-time mobilization fee times the number of caps or plugs. And so there's the option is, if someone says, you know what, I want you on my property doing that, if they did it on their own, the likelihood is it adds about $900 per individual install. So you could be looking at, I don't know what that number was of abandoned yet. Do we have that, like abandoned versus actual live numbers? No, so we suspect that there's probably between 10 and 15-ish, I think, is where we're kind of leaning. Again, we're making some estimates for you right now just to give you some ideas. But that $13.75 is a one-time price, and then the $26.25 is an every plug price times the number that we find, which is quite frankly not very expensive to help start buttoning up this line issue. When we looked at giving you solutions and options, right, the next slide is just for those considerations where if later down the line we say that it was a residential ownership versus a municipal ownership, we could then just figure out a rate by which someone could repay. So we just kind of gave some samples of what that might look like, and you could, basically prorate. It's just like we pay up front, pay later, pay now, no money up front, pay later, and you could put it to the utility bill. Those are just some samples of what that could look like. Again, we're not recommending one way or the other. We're wanting to have the information to look at and evaluate and absorb. When we do that kind of stuff, though, we do recommend that there's a recorded lien or some sort of deed restriction so that if the house is sold before it's paid off, that it does get paid out of that proceeds. But again, that table is there for you guys to see options. It's been done in other locations. What I do want to suggest, though, is that this is something that when we get to our big sewer project, as we go in, we say we've got all of this $16 million of bad city main. If the city main is bad, there's a high likelihood we're going to walk into a neighborhood and have bad lateral lines too. And so we can fix all the main we want, but we could still be looking at this in another neighborhood where we have a brand new city line and a whole bunch of potential residential lateral lines that are not new and are contributing, right? And so this is a strategy that has been used across the state of Michigan. I've got some data from East Point, Michigan as one of the places where I've seen some of this employed. But again, it's where the city can absorb the cost and then put it on a meter or on a utility bill paid over time. So there's no upfront cost. We get the bulk rate pricing, volume makes a difference. And if you do it at the same time we're doing the main, it becomes something. So it could be a discussion for the future outside of this neighborhood, but it's not too far from our future if we want to look at that as an option. And so again, that is to give you sort of what it might look like and how that might start to shape out for consideration. Moving on to the next slide. We tried to just give you an understanding of what it might look like. Not everybody, unfortunately, not everybody has a line that can be slip lined. And most likely those are a terracotta lateral line. And those are the most brittle and hard to work with. And so where there is a line, again, we're back to that, did it bow, flex, separate, crack, or collapse in a way that cannot run a liner through it? This is the condition. And what we saw was that Tunnel Vision can do an individual price of some work where they dig and cap and dig and connect pieces at one rate, or if you start doing a full line replacement, you're into a much larger number. But we gave you some ideas of what those might look like. Again, they're estimates. We did not go out and seek quotes for this. We've been working with Tunnel Vision, so the numbers are a lot tighter on Tunnel Vision as to what they've been doing because they've been out doing our scopes but these are not far off from actual numbers, but that we don't know that they're actual. But just to give you the cost, right? So slip liners in that $2,600 range, some individual type of work with some SIP could go as high as 49 if they don't do it in a bulk rate pricing. And then you get into a full dig and replace, you could be getting upwards into the tens of thousands. So we want to make sure that we're identifying what those differences are and what they look like. And in all cases, we can do bulk rate pricing and options.
I just would rather see us get this done, and I'm going to do it. Can I make a motion that?
Not yet, not yet.
We have that at the back of the deck.
No motion.
Well, I didn't,
I would rather see the rest of the.
I don't understand though that,
recommendations.
okay, but the roof drain thing is.
We're gonna explain that.
No.
We're gonna explain that, because you've told us to look at the total water infiltration and condition of the downtown area. So we're gonna go through this, and then we'll get back to what our
So-
recommendation options, you choose to take some or not.
Before we go to the next, the roof drains, can you share my screen one more time, Jason? When we're talking about property ownership and that, all these lots are parceled. Let me find a good one. So I can actually click on any one of these empty lots and it tells you who the owners are. They're not municipal ownership, they're all owned by somebody. In like this instance, the person that owns this house decided they wanted extra property, so they bought this lot right here. So this homeowner bought this lot. This lot has, not only does he have an extra lateral that comes out of this property into the main, his lateral itself goes underneath the garage and is leaking. That's the one with the water that's constantly flowing. So he would have to do a slip lining. I mean, it would cost him way too much money to do it any other way. The problem with doing it that remote way is, say this guy no longer wants all that property and wants to sell this and develop the house. Now that line is capped inside the main.
Right.
And you're talking 14 to 20 grand for them to dig and redo that whole sewer line. Like if this was my house and I owned an extra lot, I would pay the extra 2 grand to have it dug down right by the property line and a cap put on, because it's gonna save me if I ever decide to sell this piece of property in the future. So that's why each homeowner has to make that decision. It's not something that the council is just gonna say, okay, plug them all,
And so-
because each individual has to make that their own decision.
Yeah, let me just make sure everybody understood that, right? The tapping or capping or plugging at the city main
It's permanent.
eliminates a homeowner's option to change their mind later. What Bill is suggesting is that by coming 4, 5 feet in from there and capping, the homeowner can come back and then cut that cap off and do something later. So they've left themselves a choice for future changes or future development. Maybe they get, a change in an ordinance or a change in the way we do housing someday, and there's an opportunity for an accessory dwelling unit or a small house, a tiny home or whatever. And now they want to have sewer connection, and they can because they've left themselves that option. Those are things that we have to also look at when we say, where do we plug? How do we plug? But again, those are things that we just want to offer as consideration when you're thinking about it, not telling you what or how. But if there was a condition like that, and there is a condition like that for this homeowner, there may be a dialogue that occurs that says, well, what do you want? And what's the city opportunity? So we're asking you to think about that as well. Right? Okay, so going on to the roof drains now. Now this appears, Mr. Mayor, as if we're leaving the neighborhood, but we're not. What we're looking at is a contributing factor of the entirety of that downtown wet space. And as you look at this map, you see somewhere between 50 and 90 flat roofs. And on those flat roofs, they average about 3,750 square feet of surface space. And that represents about 2,328 gallons of water that is contributing to our sanitary sewer in a 1-inch rainstorm. If we all think back to the May 12th storm of 2022, that was 3 inches in a half hour.
Right.
So you can multiply that times 3 times the 50 to 90 flat homes.
Right.
What we still don't know, the indicators lead us to believe that the majority of those, but maybe not all,
Right.
are direct drain into the sanitary sewer. So when you're looking for where your water infiltration is coming and why people in this end of the neighborhood are seeing so much water in the sanitary sewer, if a 1-inch storm times 90 homes is contributing almost 4,000 gallons of water, I'm sorry, 3,000 gallons of water.
Yeah.
That's a lot of infiltration, and it all ends up where those come together and then feed down to the treatment plant. So what we are proposing we need to do is we need to investigate whether or not those flat roofs are in fact connected correctly. This is like the sump pump question, right? Like when you have a sump pump connected and it's pumping directly into the sanitary sewer, it's not supposed to be there.
Right.
Well, you have a roof drain pumping directly into a sanitary sewer, it's not supposed to be there. And that's all storm water directly infiltrating the system. And this is something that can be fixed and can be resolved and can have significant impact on that infiltration, which is why it's in front of you for this evening for consideration.
Yep.
And the other reason I bring this up is consider these roof drains a vacant lot. So if you're gonna pay out of the city funds for those 19 lots, when it comes time to enforce those roof drains, which is the same principle, it's a vacant lot that's leaking water into the sanitary system. Those homeowners are gonna come up to the city and say, well, you've done it for this group of people, what are you gonna do for this group of people? I'm only bringing that up for information, not to sway anybody's decisions on anything, but
Well, and
when
it's,
you make a decision, you have to think of how it's
and
gonna
it's,
affect.
again,
the
it's one of
others.
those conditions that were
I get that,
allowable and permittable under construction standard of the past. And now we find that they're causing infiltration problems in the future.
I look at these
So-
as two separate issues, and here's why. A lot of these are businesses too, profit-making businesses. Some may be residential.
Some are, a
but-
lot of them are residential apartments.
But they're above a business.
Like I
you
said, the
know,
only reason I'm bringing this
So
in
we're
is
here,
because the
so
ordinance.
Jason, or
I
mean,
just think these are two
but what-
different cases.
But Mr. Mayor, what we're doing is we're just presenting the things that we found. And we're gonna let you guys deliberate and make those decisions. We're not trying to influence, and that was Bill's point. We just want you to consider that that might be something that should be talked about as part of your deliberations. So when we look at the flat roofs option, there's two real ways of figuring it out. One is a dye test. We've already talked about what that looks like. In the sewer in a neighborhood where we can run multiple colors at a time, we can kind of trace that line. But in the flat roof, it's not possible. And so you have to dye, figure out if it hits the sewer,
Right.
let it dissipate, let it be completely gone, and then do the next roof. And that can take time and energy, and it would be slow to figure out. Or there's this thing called a smoke test. And so I just took a
Next slide.
slide off of the internet. This is not our data. This is
Next
just
slide,
a
please.
clip off the internet that, yeah, thank you. So there we're talking about the dye test. And this is just that internet grab of what it might look like because it's a nice visual representation. But basically, you introduce smoke into the sanitary sewer. You blow that smoke through the sanitary sewer. And if it's a vented stack in a house, the way it's supposed to be, according to code, the smoke comes out the vented stack. Nobody ever actually experiences anything. If it's a drain directly into the sanitary sewer, then it will smoke out of the wrong place, like a roof drain. And it could smoke out of a sump pump area.
Yeah, and so when you,
With the state of our city and the age of our city, I would be against any smoke testing. We would have drive for people's houses. It would be-
right, and I was just gonna bring that up. In order to do a smoke test, it isn't just throw a smoke bomb in and let the fan. There's a lot of coordination with the police department and the fire department, because in the instance of the building that I own, a lot of the pipes are disconnected inside the walls. So you'll get a lot of people calling and saying, my house is on fire, what did you just do? It's happened. I did this in Nagani, and I've been through this headache. But it's one of the ways. The other way that you can find it is just looking at the blueprints. Common sense says if their roof is draining somewhere, it's connected to the sanitary system.
And again, that's something that happens all over where you've got your flat roofs draining into the system. I mean, been common practice, but
We're not making any argument for that. What we're
Yeah.
saying is that when we're looking for water infiltration into the sanitary sewer, this is a likely contributor in the downtown area. And we just widened the circle of the downtown that we were asked to look at because there's so many in that area. And so we would ask that you consider giving us some direction on how you want us to do that or what kind of other investigation. But on slide 52, we're looking at what those options would be. The city can do dye testing. The city would have to contract for smoke. It sounds like smoke isn't the most favorable option, and that's fine. We're not necessarily making a recommendation to that. But we would definitely need to identify the complete list of those flat roofs and then work out a strategy for making sure we can get to and test those, because again, it's on a private business or a resident. We're on the roof. Probably we can use our bucket truck to get there to introduce the dye, but we still have to
I thought
coordinate
that
and do
wasn't
that.
working.
No, it is, it's a method, it's just a slower method is what we said. And then blueprints is another option.
I just think that this is a separate thing and this is brand new to us. So I really would like to get into a motion that the city would,
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Before we get into a motion or anything. All right, so this is our
Can you go back to the map there,
yeah,
Jason?
our water drainage line here, right? And those are, so this line is the same that accepts the drainage from the city. And I mean, in our road repair, I mean, are they going to dig up all of those and replace those sewer lines or no? Because I mean.
I'm not sure I understand the question. So what
Okay,
what on
would it
the, on
be
the map,
possible-
oh, right,
I
on the
mean-
map, the yellow line is the main storm line.
Right.
And it's the main travel for the
All of
utilities
this.
coming from the city down to
Mm-hmm.
the intersection by the Oasis gas station and going across the carp.
Right. Okay, and my question is, in this plan of things, would it be possible to put a separate, to accept the water from the city that would buy,
Like a
that
storm
would be-
A storm system improvement.
Right. I mean, next to, so we're not accepting
Right.
all of the city's water in
Yep.
this one.
So what we're saying is
I'm just
that, yeah,
asking the
you're
question.
at, yeah, so what we're suggesting is the water doesn't belong at all in the sanitary sewer, and it wouldn't matter when we take it out of the sanitary sewer, it's no longer gonna get to that section.
Okay, got
And
it.
we're recommending the water come out of the sanitary sewer, and it absolutely affects that neighborhood because everything's going from the top of the hill
Right.
down into town, and this is one of the low spots in town.
Okay, that answered my
And
question. So we already
yeah,
are on a
we're
plan
not,
to
we're not
try to
introducing,
divert that
we're
water
not
away.
trying to introduce a new storm system to collect that water. We're just trying to take it off of the connection they made to the sanitary
Got it.
sewer and close that additional water flow.
Okay.
And so that's why it absolutely exists. And it's, and I apologize, I'm not trying to be argumentative, Mr. Mayor, but you asked us to look at the total circumstance, which is introducing large quantities of water into the sanitary sewer and what
I
impact was
didn't
happening
have
in
a
the darn
clue that
town.
this was being done,
And all
but
of, well, it's all part of an investigation. You asked us to not limit ourselves, but to look at all things and to consider all things.
well, there's
At one
probably
point,
a
we
lot
even
of
talked-
other things around too,
and-
so I just
Exactly,
don't.
and this is a to-date status update that you asked me to present. And so to date, we've identified these things down in the downtown area with respect to laterals and mains. And we also identified these flat roofs as a potential introduction of significant water into the sanitary sewer. There are gonna be a continuation and probably for a long time, which is what we've been charged to do, is look at the system, which is why we're doing $16 million sewer projects and $20 million drinking water projects. It's not small.
All right, well, I'm going to make a motion right now that we pay the full amount for the to repair all of the pipe issues that are south of the high school out of the sewer fund at no charge to the residents, and that we work with the residents to make that happen. I fully believe that this is something that most of these folks did not bargain for, and I also don't think that they should be having to think about this over the Christmas holiday either, on where they might be able to come up with money. So that's my motion.
I guess support for discussion. I am a little apprehensive to make any decision on anything yet at this point. I think part of what had been brought up previously wasn't there discussion about how we were concerned about the drainage because it wasn't getting to catch basins? Todd, didn't you say that that was part of the concern in the neighborhood?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm not supposed to be. Anyway, so I looked back into the minutes, and at that September 6th meeting, there was a motion made by Councilmember Scanlon, supported by Councilmember Bean, that we were hiring an engineering firm to do an analysis of the whole area. Has that been set up?
So we have UPEA is doing complete analysis of the storm and sewer and water as we are related to these large projects, which is where that initial background starts, right? They are engaged and they are actively looking at, and we are communicating the telescoping and televising. The engineering firm would do exactly what we've done, is they would contract with a televising service to do all of this work before trying to engineer a solution to a problem.
So the simple answer
And
is
so-
no, we did not have an engineer after a council motion.
So the simple answer is we have engineers engaged in all efforts. They are not assigned specifically to investigate the sewer lines because we were working through the analysis so that we could outline what the engineers need to engineer. They don't engineer investigation of sewer lines for leaks and breaks. They engineer whether or not that line needs to be replaced, relocated, or in some other way, shape, or form done. And we're on conversations every day and sharing this data with our engineering firm, UPEA, because they are currently investigating all things sewer and all things water, which includes this area, does not separate it out. But there was no reason to give them a separate task order to engineer something where they're already engineering solutions to sewer lines that manages infiltration. And we're getting to a point where we can absolutely do what you've asked us to do, which is to say, here, we need to design something because here's the problems. So
It was a council motion that
Okay,
passed and we did not have an
Let's not get
engineering
into
firm.
an argument.
So
That's a
I
failure
just to finish
on
my
that
thought then on that is I think that some problems have been identified, for sure, with what's gone on so far. I think that it's a piece of the puzzle. I don't feel that I have all of the knowledge that I need to have to make any kind of concrete decision right now.
Well,
Okay, and-
I think that,
If I can say
You
something,
can.
sorry. You guys asked for information. I was not expecting any motions tonight. I wasn't expecting any answers. If you want me to hand over this to the engineer, I have no problem giving it to him. But if you wanted them to start doing this, it would have cost a lot of money to have an engineer do what I did. But they can take all of my data and go with it. But they're going to tell you the same thing. The city sewer main is intact. There's no cracks. There's no infiltration on the city side. And the drainage is the issue. And when you say that the roof drains are not an issue with this, it wholeheartedly is. If you're putting 300,000 gallons of water in a sanitary system that's not meant to handle it, then it's got to back up somewhere. And that's when we end up pumping water into Partridge Creek. We end up sitting at the end of the high school, pumping that extra water because we can't get the water out of that area fast enough because we're getting too much from other
well, and
Oh,
areas.
my motion would solve some of that water issues.
But
And
by that motion, though.
you, though, may not have expected anything, but I was talking to Craig before the meeting, and you led me to believe that you were kind of expecting a motion tonight on some stuff. So I made my motion, and I'm not going to withdraw it, because that's.
I'm not asking you to withdraw it. To answer your question, we have not ignored council action. We have, you can't write a request for proposal for an engineering firm and to say, hey, go look at a downtown area and decide what's wrong with it and re-engineer it. We investigated at a much more cost-effective manner to where we can outline and identify We've identified some, and yes, there are some potential decisions that could be made this evening. We don't say, we want a motion, we say, here's some potential discussions. Absolutely, make a motion. I wouldn't recommend absorbing all costs for all people while we're still trying to investigate, but this was presented as an update to the investigation you've asked us to do.
Councilmember Furby, I have a question though. What was do you have the exact language of the motion that was made?
I think, Your Honor, that the language, the motion is somewhat irrelevant, because I think that the analysis that's been done is top shelf. And in my mind, I have a path going forward, notwithstanding your motion here. But I have, with the information, and you and I talked earlier about not having an engineer. As I said earlier, it's not over. But I have no reason to say we gotta get UPA involved. I do have in my mind a direction that I would like to, after we deal with the motion, I would like to present for council to consider to move forward in a timely manner. So I guess addressing the engineering in the motion, I'm happy we did, because we saved a bunch of money. I don't feel that tonight I've got a complaint that we didn't. I know that they're doing our GIS and that, so I'm willing to forget about the motion, and I guess you did follow it to a point. My point is now we're here to move forward on the data that we have.
But well, and here's the other thing though. We don't know how these residents feel either, because we haven't talked to them yet about this.
So
So
that's,
to that point, I cannot see supporting this motion. We don't know the number of houses. We don't have a serious estimate of what that would cost, and we don't know what those residents would like to do. In future motions and discussions, I think that some of the potential cost sharing payment plan things, I think that those are all excellent options to look at. And I would intend to support some form of that in a future motion and discussion, but without having input, without having numbers, just flat saying we pay for all of it, there's absolutely no way.
I don't feel like we should be passing this on to the residents, because we don't know how long this has been going
we're
on
not
for.
even there, Jason.
So, well,
We're not
yeah,
saying
but
that.
she said, she brought up a cost sharing method, but I'll call the question. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Kathy, roll call, please.
Councilmember Bain?
No.
Councilmember Furby?
No.
Councilmember Halverson?
No.
Councilmember Scanlon?
No.
Mayor Chapman?
Yes. Motion fails. Okay.
Now, if I may, Your Honor,
You may.
what I would like to see come from tonight is, first, I'd like to address what we've been calling abandoned lines. And Bill touched on it. There are no abandoned properties. Somebody owns every property, but I'm still calling it an abandoned line because the person that owns the property didn't raise the post that was there before. So when I say abandoned line, I want it to be unidentified as anybody's line, just for the purpose of discussion. I would like to see us determine the exact number of abandoned sewer lines that are contributing to this problem.
In that area?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. This is all we're talking about.
And you're talking like my example is, here's a lot, and there's a line that definitely goes to it.
Correct.
Goes out.
Correct.
That's easy.
The other thing that I think is to make sure that we can do the tunnel vision plug and explain to us a procedure, and I guess we got the cost, but if we can skinny that cost down. So we've got, just as an example, we've got 12. And tunnel vision tells us for mobilization and plugging these 12 lines, X amount.
Yep. And they did that. The mobilization is a one-time fee. It doesn't sound like if it's multiple days, they're gonna charge us each day. It sounds like they're gonna leave the equipment here. So it's, the mobilization is, we'd bite the bullet on that one. It's $1,300, I believe, or 14. And then each plug, they normally do it by footage. So if they have to go 200 feet up a line and put this in, it's that, they're waiving that and they're just saying, we'll come to the town and for each one that we do, it's $26.50, I believe. And the way that this happens is the camera that we're televising, imagine a piece of tin or metal that's bent, it's spring-loaded, it's under tension. They compress it, they go down with their robot, they get to that lateral, and they release it, and it does this. And there's some sealant that's on there, so it's gonna stay permanent so that when we jet it, it doesn't come out. But again, if a homeowner decides to do that, that lot is an empty lot then,
Well,
and
that's
can't
what
be
I'm
developed.
saying. We would have to be, along with what you're talking about, are we gonna be in contact with these homeowners to
And
get,
that's
to
part of what,
decide?
that's part of what I'm gonna say. Because
because
it's their decision to terminate the
absolutely.
pipe.
I
Right.
had the incident of our house there one day, burned down the next, okay? So we had to rebuild. So if, God forbid, something like that happens to these people, are they gonna be on the hook then for the added expense of reopening the line, doing all that?
Well,
So it has to
See, the difference
be-
is, and we're gonna talk to these people, of course, but the difference is, Renell, you're doing the same site. These are vacant lots.
But they're owned by those owners
Right,
who
right.
could potentially wanna build,
They could,
sell.
and then they have the right to say, no, I don't want.
That's
But
what,
it's
I just
not a-
wanna
it's
make
not a
sure that,
replacement Like you would say.
Right.
right,
Absolutely, they'd have the right, because it's their property. So
So,
we would identify those people, get the fixed cost. No, I lost my train of thought.
sorry.
That's all right. It doesn't take much. We don't have to do any excavating, we don't have to break ground,
Well, we
so we
may-
don't have any blacktop, we're gonna disrupt if there's good blacktop. And in my mind, that would come out of the sewer fund.
And just, so-
And not a motion, but
Yep.
at the monthly meeting in January, I would hope that council would have the information for a quick review of this portion and take action at the January meeting.
just on the vacant ones though.
Just, those are the big troublemakers right now. I think we have to do like a root cause type of analysis here. What's the biggest problem we've got? I think that's the biggest problem.
so at the January meeting, do you want me to have talked to each one of these people and find out who does and doesn't want the plug too?
If you're able to, I wasn't gonna overvote you like that, but
Well, I mean, I can if they're home and that, it's, you know,
it certainly wouldn't, even if we don't get them all.
I mean, those align to cost, though, when you're asking us for exact cost associated with the project. If we haven't got the answer by a resident as to whether they do or don't, then I can't give you exact cost. I can give you the maximum cost based on the number of lines.
Exactly.
But you said it, but you said exact cost, so I'm, because apparently words matter when we're trying to do the right thing, and we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. So it sounds like you're looking for the maximum cost associated with abandoned lines and start discussion with residents.
Correct. And I'm sure we're gonna have to develop a document releasing us and admitting that they
Absolutely.
did authorize that plug.
So my couple of questions I have with that is, that to identify those lots, so we identify those lots and is, you
And they're
said that's pretty easy. But then the next step would be to identify like maybe what that problem is, right? Because if it's, so we've identified these lots, you can't quite ask, I mean, we could come up with a maximum cost to sort of remediate or to alleviate that problem, but without sending the camera up there without their permission, we also don't really know, like it might be something easier than, I mean,
no,
Right,
the plugging is gonna be the absolute easiest. It's just a matter of looking at the lateral cards and it tells me exactly how many feet I have to go up. We would actually put the thing together that says where we want the plugs.
okay.
That's all easy stuff. My only question is there any way we could have this in February instead of January?
I was gonna say, it's
Because I'm on vacation till January 2nd.
I have no problem with it. As long as I'm assuming council's position here, but I think council would be supportive of taking that cost on the city. And that's the main reason for the action. So going to February isn't an issue as far as I'm concerned.
Another question that I had is any of this seasonally dependent or
No.
weather dependent?
Nope.
Okay.
Not the
This is
plugging.
nice part.
Well,
Not the
and, I mean, I did some figures. It's not like this is gonna be a $200,000 problem. I think one of my estimations based on what was presented was 79,900 or something like that would be one of the biggest hits to
Well,
do
you
it,
said
but.
all, and there's no number to all, so.
Well, we had
it's-
19, Councilmember Bean, that was listed.
19 problems.
19.
Some are laterals that are being used, some are laterals that are vacant lots.
And that's, again,
Again,
why
I-
what if we
there's a
later-
lot
Hang
more,
on,
a lot more
Lindsay, I'm
work that I gotta do.
Discovered that mine has an issue too, and I live way
Lindsay, I'm
over on-
speaking here.
I live way over on Vine Street, and we.
Lindsay, you're out of order.
I,
I was speaking. I was trying to answer a question and you do this to me at every meeting. You do.
Your Honor, when you have a moment, could I please speak?
You, absolutely. But
Okay, then,
when I was,
when may I have my moment then?
so when I was going through these, thank you. When I was going through all of these though, and in my motion, it also said to work with the residents. So it wasn't like it was a blind number. We had estimated of 19 presented to us tonight, and that's what my motion was on. So I wanted that to be clarified because I'm not just throwing it out in the book that, oh, now we've got 30 over there identified. It was to work with what we had. Now you may speak.
Okay, well, that was not clear in the motion that you made, so, and what's to say the difference if my line has a problem 6 months from now and it's similar, because I wouldn't be surprised, actually, if my house has a
No,
very
absolutely
similar
not.
issue.
No.
And so what is going to delineate between, having paid for this group all up front and anybody else in the city all up front? I can't see, as I said, I'm not opposed to working toward a solution that helps alleviate costs and makes it the most palatable for everyone, but I just, to that, I just.
Well,
If I
it's
might,
never,
Your
you
Honor,
may, yes.
my response to that, Lindsay, would be that houses that are being raised nowadays have to have a permit pulled, they have to be inspected. And in those days, like I said, somebody, hey, you want a bunch of lumber? Come and tear my house down. And then they got the basement filled in and the pipes laid in.
Yep.
So I think that the future, and the same earlier, somebody said, well, the roof drain issue, they're gonna say, well, you paid for those people, paid for, no. These people were a very unique situation. We had a whole neighborhood that had problem, and it was not period correct, but it was the time period of this neighborhood that caused these problems. It was in a time when lots of houses got torn down in the neighborhood. They got torn down illegally, for lack of a better term, and that's why we did that. Now we're changing our storm sewer system for that fact. We're switching it, so I wouldn't have a problem answering why we're not paying for that part of it.
Right, well, and we take things by a case-by-case basis too, and we've identified through a lot of these residents what the problems they're having. So that, again, just because we would be fixing the problem for them doesn't mean we're gonna go out and fix the problem for everybody else. But if there's an area where there are massive problems like this, we look at them. But to Pat's point, I agree with you on that. Thank you.
Your Honor, I don't understand how we can take each thing as a case-by-case basis and have a justifiable reason for why I beg to differ, Pat, with, we find another neighborhood 2 years from now that has a similar issue. I don't see how we could justify that. It's neither here nor there, because the motion that was made didn't pass. I think that the path moving forward, and I'm not opposed to finding an amicable solution. I just don't think that paying for everything up front is the solution. However, if we're back to what we were discussing a few minutes ago, if we're looking at February for a list of those abandoned lines that come from vacant lots, that maybe that may be something that we're able to move forward with more quickly, that the discussion can happen with the homeowner, we can make a decision, and then we can apply some standards for how we would move forward with that, than looking at houses that are currently occupied that have different issues, right? Those are gonna be more complicated, potentially fixes, potentially more expensive because they're longer. When we know those, and when we know the costs, and we know the homeowner's desire to fix that, then we can apply similar logic and standards
Absolutely.
and then make a decision.
And is there a chance too, by doing these plugs as our initial, expenditure, and I mean, I am, as far as I'm for the city picking up the costs of those plugs. But, I mean, aren't we going to, once that's done, aren't we gonna find out if that solution alone is not going to alleviate
Absolutely.
a lot of these problems? I mean,
Absolutely. Certain
as
people
opposed
may
to-
not have to fix their sewer line.
If
we
they
correct this
might be
portion.
completely absolved from paying anything if this is the root problem. So
Yeah,
I
that's
think by just going,
If
we're just
one of
gonna,
those pipes, a good example, if one
we're
of
gonna
those
throw the
pipes on
baby
a
out with the
vacant lot
bathwater and
was
do
in a bad
an
spot,
overkill
and
fix.
you got a 50-year rain.
Yeah,
And all the dirt from that spot washed away and took all the dirt from your footings. Capping that off is gonna be a huge,
well, that's what I'm saying. So I think,
Agreed,
by
but-
starting there,
No, I
it
didn't
may
mean to interrupt.
alleviate some of that.
The other thing that you guys, like I said, information only, and I'm out here to protect you guys also. The reason I included the ordinance is by doing what you're suggesting, you're actually going against the ordinance. So I think that the lawyer would have to also chime in on any decision that you guys do make, because as you know, some people say that we don't follow ordinances, and I don't want you guys going down
what
that road.
area do you think we'd be violating?
It's the two ordinances that are in there.
It's the homeowner's responsibility to pay.
And I'm not saying we don't do it, I'm just saying it might take an amendment to the ordinance, but
It wouldn't hurt to have the
Right.
lawyer review it, but in my eyes,
I agree.
the homeowner's dead. The homeowner's gone.
Yes.
The person who bought the lot is suffering it. You
And
could say, well, you
shouldn't-
should have
yeah.
had due diligence. We can play all kinds of games.
Well, I agree with you on the whole night. Lindsay, stop.
Jason, can you put slide
I
37 up,
fully
please?
agree with what you've been saying because
I
I
had no
don't,
problem with her reviewing.
yeah, and
That's all
I
I
will
asked.
not support any passing on to those owners of the lots. It's not even something I'll even consider. So,
So I think for this counselor's part, we've given direction.
If I may, I want to make sure that I've got the direction so that Kathy's got the right direction documented as well. What I heard was that we're prioritizing abandoned, and I'm putting the word equals, unassigned lines, meaning these are lines that are not connected to a resident, being used as part of the residential use of a sanitary sewer, but have been found as a non-connected line. Identify the number, identifying the cost, getting a resident decision, which says that they will or do not want us to participate in this solution with them. A hold harmless agreement is drafted such that they acknowledge that they gave us direction to do this capping, and that what I don't have clear and I'd like to have clear is the location for the plug. So the best for the city is at the joint.
absolutely.
The best for the resident might not be at the joint. And so if a resident agrees in their decision to allow us to participate, but they want a 5-foot segment of line, are we agreeing to that cost? Are we agreeing to some other terms, or is that an individual discussion at
In
February?
my mind, that's just a no. For the offer we're making
That would be
is the
fair.
offer that stands.
Well, that would
If
be,
the homeowner says,
homeowner would
I need
want-
5 feet back
well,
for
then
this
the
step, it's
homeowner would
no.
have the option of saying, I want a 5-foot.
Right.
They-
but
And
that would
And then
take it
I
out of
will,
this-
then,
Then they would-
but
Or
then
could
they
we
would absorb the
determine, or
cost
can we
of that.
determine the cost difference for that 5-foot decision and let them bear that cost.
They would have to
I
do
think
that.
that's-
I'm just trying to make sure that we have clear, understood direction for what we're doing, because I don't want to go to a resident and say, guess what, it's off the table because you wanted 5 feet, but it's really good value to them. We should at least say, okay, well, if this is the additional cost, if you want to absorb it, then we'd have to put that into their agreement, under the whole
That's
darn agreement.
absolutely fine.
I think that's fair,
Okay.
yep.
Okay, did I miss anything in the direction that I understood?
And
My,
then also, obviously, all pending attorney's review.
right. And then my question is, though, we still have to check the homes that are listed too, don't we? I mean,
Not at this point.
not
I
at
would
this
say.
point? Okay.
think that's
I
the
would
next
say
step.
that, and as we talk with the citizens, I think those who haven't been here are gonna be very happy that we're taking this step. I think this is a very good step to start fixing the problem.
Is this a motion or is this?
There might be an,
Direction.
there might be an opportunity to give direction, have us determine whether the residents would want to participate in scoping their residential lateral lines to help them, to help them determine, but that has a cost too. But if tunnel vision's gonna be in here doing work, right, there, we would be able to take that mobilization cost off of that process and possibly have a low rate, just a scoping of a line. Hey, we can come in and look at your line and tell you if you have a problem or not. Not offering any solution other than maybe, getting in a low rate
And would-
investigation of their line and maybe,
Okay, so that does pose a question then. Would we be paying for their scoping of their pipe, or are we going to say?
I'm
that
asking you for
they can
direction, I'm
pay for
just
it?
giving you
That's why I'm
something to
asking you.
consider.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, I would want to know, I don't know that I'm ready to say we would or we wouldn't pay for. I would want to know what the homeowner's desire is to do. And if the property owner for the abandoned lots, what their desire is, do they want to have it scoped? Because maybe they want to have the whole thing scoped, I don't know, or do they want to have it?
The abandoned ones, we're not talking about scoping, that's,
Okay,
there's no way to scope those.
okay,
You have to do it from inside the house, I think Craig was talking about.
Yeah.
Active ones that are leaking dirt in that,
Okay.
in my
That goes
opinion,
in
there's a
through-
problem, they go through the house to the main.
okay.
And that's a different.
We
Okay.
could certainly
Okay.
ask the question of the homeowner while we're out there. And you got a couple months, so, and we could as well get a price from.
So I think you're making a direction to say, discuss with Tunnel Vision on cost per line, offer the resident the option to participate, not knowing whether or not it would be offered as a cost share or not. But it would be discussed at the February meeting. Ask them to come back, announce that we're having this meeting to discuss that again in February, where they could voice their stance as well, but they could document that conversation with us.
More information.
And so we have at least their input. We have what that cost would be, so you can decide whether or not you want to do a cost share and what their interest is or isn't related to those things. But I imagine that most of those lines down there, if they haven't done a update as of last 10 years, it's probably terracotta pipe and probably in danger of failing. And so there's probably if I were the resident, or if I were even talking to a friend that was in that neighborhood, I'd be like, if they're gonna let you scope and they're gonna help you get some of the costs, like just the mobilization cost down, I would want it, right? But we want to make sure we have that conversation, but I just want to make sure you're giving me the direction to do that.
Yes, have the conversation. So, is that all for this? Anybody else? Okay, putting this away, and we are going to move on to public comment.
So did you want me to finish the presentation? Or
Oh,
was that all
I
you
thought
wanted
that's
for-
all,
you
I just
decided
asked if
that?
we were done.
Well, I thought you were asking if you're done
Oh,
with dialogue.
okay.
You stopped the middle
I
of
thought
the
we were done with the
presentation.
whole
You
thing.
stopped the middle of the presentation and said you wanted to make a motion.
Well, okay.
I'm happy to end it right here. This is stuff you didn't ask for, it's an
I would-
update, but.
I would like to see the rest of the
Okay.
presentation, please.
Okay, so we are on
54.
slide 54. So we have been talking a lot about scoping lines. We have been talking a lot about having Tunnel Vision do that, and Tunnel Vision is a great contractor to work with and have worked for us. But every time you hire a contractor,
Right.
you're paying a higher rate than if you can do it yourself. I believe that Bill has a wealth of knowledge and experience and has been training his water and sewer department to have a similar knowledge base being grown. And one of the options to consider in the future, and we're not asking for any decision tonight, we're just giving you data, is that there might be an opportunity to look at doing these camera investigations of systems on our own. I think Nagani had one or has something similar that is a camera and a trailer and all the equipment that Tunnel Vision brings to us. But we're at the mercy of calling Tunnel Vision, coordinating contract, waiting for their availability, and then doing something. And sometimes you need to scope in the middle of the circumstance, and waiting 2-3 days is complicated and troublesome. So we just wanted to throw out some data there. So there is a potential to potentially buy our own camera system and trailer system and have the same technology and be able to do it where an incident happens. Bill can call out the water sewer department and have them investigate as it's happening.
I think this is a good idea, absolutely.
And so we just threw out some guesstimates on return on investment. We think the return on investment is less than 5 years based on current usage, current contracting.
And we
But
don't know what else we'd
something-
have to use it for in the
Something
meantime,
to
too.
consider. We use cameras a lot for a lot of things, and it's getting more and more useful for us. And as we get through this sewer project that's coming up, as part of the sewer project, we could possibly buy it using the $16 million funds to help with looking at lateral lines of residents along the new sewer line. So something to consider. The next slide,
Full
please.
support on that.
Just gives you an idea of what that might look like, what the equipment looks like. You can see at the top right is when it's folded down, it gets put down through a manhole, and then as it starts rolling through, it articulates and can turn and pivot and do all kinds of things, and it ties back to a computer, and it's wound up to a trailer. So threw that out there as something to consider for the future.
I think you brought that up to me one time, and I told you I think it would be a good idea, so.
Yeah, I know.
I would be happy to support something like that, too.
Okay, so then if we go to the last slide, this is where I had indicated there might be some potential discussion for possible decisions to be made this evening. Not looking for any, but that there were some. I think we've discussed lateral lines to a beaten dead horse. I think that the roof drains, you've indicated that your desire is to maybe look at some dye testing and doing some of it the low intrusive way, also with building blueprints, and see if we can identify some of those numbers as we go forward, and to not think about the smoke testing. So I think you've already given us that direction. Did I take that correctly, or is there something I missed related to roof drains?
Yeah, the roof drain thing, to me, I didn't know was coming, so I don't have any, I haven't had enough time to digest that, so.
But did I add
That's
it?
kind of a back burner right at this
Yeah.
time. The roof drainage.
I agree.
As part of our storm sewer issue, yes, but
This is groundwater and stormwater infiltrating the sanitary sewer
So my,
for drains that are connected and pumping that roof drain into the sanitary sewer.
I understand.
So,
I do have one question here. Wouldn't if they had, a peaked roof or whatever you want to call it, and it rolled down into the street, it would be going into the same system, wouldn't it? Or-
no.
No,
So,
it isn't.
no, it
I
goes
didn't-
into the storm
What?
sewer. And it goes into,
So-
it goes into the ground, it goes into the storm sewer. So when you have a
Well,
peaked
we have a-
roof, you generally have gutters.
Right.
Not every house in this town has gutters, but it hits gutters, and then the downspout carries it across the ground. Some of it
Would-
goes into the ground, some of it goes into the storm system, and then it hits the storm water and goes
All
out
of it, though,
to.
does go into the storm sewer system? I'm just, or
Not-
the other
Sewers
one.
you see
Not
on
into the
street,
sanitary
water
sewer.
that storms.
So we're talking about roof drains that have a flat roof that
Yes,
has a pipe
I know.
that specifically comes off of the roof and goes
Yep.
into the sanitary sewer. And they're not being metered, it's somewhere after the meter, so they're not being, they're not being metered for water that's going
Right,
into the
and I-
sanitary sewer.
yeah.
And it's unnecessary water because it's really the storm.
Taking up the capacity.
Yeah.
of the-
And because that's all downstream of where we're talking about, if that's overloaded and flooded and it backs up, then it adds to, it complicates the issue that we're discussing.
And I'm-
in the
It significantly
Right, and-
overloads the neighborhood that's in question at a rapid
Right.
rate.
And my thoughts on that then is if the storm sewer system is down there too, in the same area, would it be possible to look at rerouting all of those drains into the storm sewer system?
That was
or
what,
is that
that
gonna
was
be a
what
huge
Congress,
cost?
that's what Councilmember Rennell was asking, Halverson. She was asking that clarity, is that when you take the drain and you disconnect it from the sanitary sewer, you gotta drain it elsewhere. The elsewhere is going to be onto the ground, into the storm sewer, but we already have the system. We're just putting the water in the right place.
Right,
So when you disconnect it from the sanitary sewer and put it in the correct place, there's no new construction of storm
Right, we
sewer.
would just have to
You're
get
just
it going
diverting
onto
it
the
correct.
road,
All we're
yeah.
doing is talking about putting the water in the right
I
place.
definitely think that should be looked into, and I guess my only ask for direction on this is find us how many are contributing and
I think that's what,
data.
I think that's what was presented to us.
Right.
was how
Right, that's
many
all the
and-
pink.
And the capacity of what that was, I think at
Right.
the moment, I think the manager interpreted our direction correctly, that I think that that's definitely a contributing factor. I think that the abandoned lines on vacant lots are sort of low-hanging fruit in having a solution or a start to a solution. I think that the rubber roof, because then we go back to, and that was the same question that we discussed earlier, was if we are going to pay or help property owners to alleviate their sanitary sewer lines on their private property, that's no different than the 50 flat roofs that have been identified that are contributing to the infiltration.
Right.
So we need to have a justifiable standard for how we're going to move forward with these, because it's going to be the same circumstance with those 50 flat roofs as it is with our maybe 10 abandoned lines. And so I think that we need to take a measured approach to each one of these, start with those, the kind of low-hanging fruit, see what the solution is, the homeowners, right? Because the water infiltration from the flat roofs is definitely a contributing factor, but it's not.
It's
but
not as low hanging
it's-
fruit as the other.
Yeah, and if we can work with the homeowners and get those, and stop the infiltration of dirt and extra water that is plugging that up, then it may be enough to alleviate that. I think that's a lot of water that's going into those, and with large water events that we've been having, it's definitely something we need to look at, but I would say that's a little bit further down the road.
Okay,
Well,
because I'm just looking at,
let me just throw out a food for thought. And yes, I don't disagree with any of the things you said, but when we talk about low hanging fruit, right? The Vista in
I
Negaunee
know I've been,
collapsed because of water,
right,
right? We annually are having to go onto like the Butler Theater, who has no local ownership, and that roof gets flooded. When all of
I may
the
have
flat
an update for you
when
on
all the
that.
flat roofs are contributing to a saturated sanitary sewer, there's nowhere for that water to go, and it's gonna sit on houses and then, or on flat roofs, and then potentially penetrate and cause structural damage.
yeah,
The ownership of that person has to monitor the roof and make sure, but when it's backed up in the sanitary sewer because it's got nowhere to go, and we have a low-hanging fruit option to get that diverted.
Right.
It gives capacity to the sanitary sewer, it takes all that water, puts it elsewhere, and it limits the risk of long-term wear and tear on those buildings, including
It does,
like
yes.
the Butler, which was being.
The point I'm making is that everything you're saying is true. But our agenda says we're here to talk about South Third Street.
well,
I
and
don't
then why
think
was
that
this in
that
there?
affects South Third Street.
It absolutely does.
I'm not done, unless it's one of those 50-year events like we had.
Right, and
So
in,
great, it's a
ahead,
good
yeah.
cause,
Keep-
it's a great, it's true, I'm not doubting it, but that's what I said, it's a back burner.
And again, that's why I didn't understand why I was in this in the first place, but one of the recommended course of actions on page 52 would be to establish a complete list of all flat roofs, use of a drone or similar option for which the contractor will investigate. And that's what I was saying. Is that on paper tonight, the full list, or are we going to establish? Because that's what I was asking the question about.
It's just me looking at the GIS.
That's what I thought. I didn't think we had a complete. Yeah.
But the reason they are brought, and I understand if you think that it doesn't affect Thursday, it does in the fact that when you're talking about the lateral, in a vacant lot, it's not a lot of, it is water and a lot of dirt going in it. But there's twice as much coming off of a roof.
Right.
Going into that sanitary, which is causing them to back up.
When was the last time you had to put a pump in the ground?
May 3rd,
When was the time before that?
November, and then previously.
So it was all the big events we've had.
Mhm.
Every time we have a heavy rain.
Every time we have heavy rain?
Since I've been here 2 years, I've bypassed pump at least 4 times. And that last one cost us a lot of money because of the amount of water that we had.
Well, and that was weather. But I think that this should have somewhat of a priority
Agreed.
over the stormwater. We don't have a stormwater system or a plan or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like we said, Marquette, you get billed for stormwater disposal. We have to do something about stormwater, but I think our priority is to get the things we discussed tonight rolling. And I don't disagree with anything on the stormwater, but I still think it's back burner for now.
I agree. And again, that's why I was asking the point on that too, but I agree.
So I guess I'll retract somewhat of a back burner, and maybe it's like middle burner.
Middle burner? I can live with middle burner.
Yeah, so
fair.
if we're looking at having the data on the vacant or the abandoned lines on vacant lots for our February meeting, then I would say that we're probably looking at maybe a full assessment of flat roofs for March, or, I mean, that's not that difficult to do. Just have a number
very
of what
reasonable.
those are.
Yep.
So maybe we just, is that okay then, just to say like, let's.
No,
look at
I'm just
those
looking for
numbers?
direction based
Yeah.
on what we've given you.
Yeah.
Like, you asked us to consider all things
So we don't.
infiltrating the storm sewer in that lower section of town.
Yeah.
We believe that this is a large contributor.
Sure.
And yes, I think it's a middle hanging fruit.
Okay.
But it's much lower than the laterals of residential laterals versus abandoned laterals. So layering it and
Yeah.
getting direction and time, this is just an
I think
opportunity.
if we do A, the caps, B, the residential laterals, C, the stormwater.
I'm in agreement with you on that.
You know,
I'll
if
agree with you.
We just
yes.
have to get an order to it, we can multitask.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think if we say March for flat roofs, then we don't spring it on you in February and say like, oh yeah, and then if you however you want to prioritize time and getting that taken care of.
Is that enough time between, like what Pat just said, was doing
I can get you
that?
numbers to see if I can get it completed. I know I can do those big.
Portion of it. Yeah, and I guess I would want to take a little bit of pressure off you in light of what Pat said. We do the
Caps should be
caps,
priority.
then we do the residential, maybe by March, and then we look maybe even to April, give you some more time on that.
March here for road rates.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that should be
March,
cool.
because
Okay.
we're getting into spring.
All right,
when
that's
we're gonna
fine,
get
all right. I was just trying
a
to,
deluge of
By the
water.
time you
Figure
get
out,
by the time you get to May, you're getting that big snow.
Yeah.
Oh,
big
yeah,
snow
yeah.
melt, and then
Well,
We
you're
might,
ready to-
bumper caves in, we might stumble on a $3 million grant.
Maybe.
well, I did want to just tell you is that they're working on a way to pay for a new roof on that right now.
Well, I think there's potential other ways to maybe fix this flat roof problem.
I do,
You
yeah.
know, we're talking about, have a community garden right next to a huge flat roof. And at my house, my rainwater is collected in tanks to use to water my garden, my yard, everything.
Rain capture's great.
I mean, so during the course of this time, we can probably maybe incorporate some solutions into grant money that we're
Sure.
talking about, the community garden, the development.
And maybe Partridge Creek would want to take that on too, I don't know.
Exactly. So,
I like
you
your
know,
thinking on that one.
but I agree. I don't think that can wait too long because all that rainwater that's coming off those flat roofs is going to them.
Yeah, I know.
So that, without the water, they don't have the problem.
Okay, I was
You know
just
what I mean?
trying to make sure that we were giving him enough time.
So that does conclude the presentation now that we got the directions we need.
All right,
A lot of good information, very good.
all right, so now we will move on to public comment, and the limit is 3 minutes per person. Mike, go ahead. I just gotta get my timer on here.
Okay, Mike Tompkins.
Hang on. We gotta get things changed around quick. Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Okay, Mike Tompkins, 612 North Third Street. I'm glad to see that you're trying to make some progress for these people in their locations. The only thing you gotta be careful of is everybody's assuming that every flat roof in town is a swimming pool. They are not. That every lateral that's in that location is leaking water 100%. They are not, because a lot of those homes were torn down by the city of Ishpeming itself. And talking to a few of the old timers, they concreted them and packed them with rags and stuff like this. So there's no real indication that there's leakage coming in from all 19 of them. Because they're packed with dirt, when you have a zillion gallons of water blowing through this system, filling up with dirt, water's lazy. It goes wherever it's easy. So it can, and they're only, what, a quarter inch per 10 feet is the average grade? Doesn't take long for mud to slide 20 feet up inside of a pipe. So just an initial view of that can be a total waste of time. But you have to come up with some way to figure out, if you came to me and I owed lot number 12 on 4th Street, well, your line is plugged, prove it. I'm not paying $3,000 to have you guys put a plug in there when there's nothing wrong with it. You have to prove that there's something wrong with that piece of pipe, especially if it's the city's responsibility to give me clean water, clean sewer, and drainage. Flat roofs is one thing, and I've worked on flat roof projects for, I hate to say this, 40 years. A lot of the newer buildings that have flat roofs have enough pitch to them so that they run their water off. They don't use drains in the roofs as much as they used to. And any roof that's maintained properly, that has roof drains in it, has a simple plumbing system that's not hard to go and look. Oh, there's a plumbing system right there, coming down through the attic. And it's easy to maintain and it's easy to look at because they all have to be fixed to a point where they can maintain their drain systems. We ran into this problem in the 70s when everybody was going energy efficient. My roof is leaking. Well, yeah, you insulated your roof. Now the heat's not going through the roof, and guess what? Everything's freezing that's coming down on it, so now the load is getting huge on your roof because you've changed the design. It was designed for cold heat. The heat rises, melted the snow on the roof, it went down the drains. You go to Chicago, they literally shovel their snow from the sidewalks into the basements of the buildings. That's how they get rid of their snow. Melts in the basement, goes down the storm drain. So this is not a problem that nobody else has. Everybody has it. But the other thing is when you start plugging all this stuff up, where's that water gonna go that you're plugging up? Is it gonna start running? Water's lazy. Is it gonna go into people's basements? It's gonna find a way somewhere because you're not gonna stop it. So just be careful and try not to, I'm looking at it this way, don't be making decisions on something where you don't have 100% of your information correct.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay.
Claudia Demer, Estate 21 Maurice, in Ishpeming. Did the county or the city, through back taxes, demolish any of these buildings and then sell those lots? I have a feeling a lot of those were taken down by the county and the city and then sold to whoever bought them. So I think you need to look into that because I think in that case, the city and maybe even the county is responsible.
Okay. Is there anybody else for public comment? Okay, Todd?
Todd Kopanen, 409 South 3rd Street. I know for a fact the property I bought next to my home, I purchased from the city of Ishpeming. So I'm not sure who tore down the house. That was gone before I bought the property, but I bought that on silent auction or sealed bid through the city of Ishpeming. Secondly, I'm listening to all of this and I agree that there's a stormwater, sewer, all of that stuff, but we still haven't, or I haven't heard a single thing brought up about all the water coming down all those streets up above me and somehow finding its way and filling my entire property. We put in an extra drain, but there's no way the water will find that drain because we never got a roll curb in there to direct it to that drain. And I've brought this up multiple times, but yet here we are. So in the spring, when the water starts melting and it starts flowing over from 4th Street and it starts flowing down the bluff and it fills up on the other side of that railroad grade and it starts bubbling up out of the ground, it's all coming onto my property. And then I'm out there sandbagging a half a block one way and a half a block down the alley by myself to try to save my property. And we have not addressed that at all, other than to put another drain in that won't get any water in it. And I'm not trying to point fingers or blame anybody, but I've come here asking for help. I've not come here to be an adversary. I've not come here to be a jerk. I've come here to try to get people to work with me to try to help me figure this out. And from my viewpoint, we're not there because I know what I'll be doing this spring. We do it every year. So I would hope that when I call the hotline saying I got thousands of gallons of water flowing onto my property, I need some help. This year, maybe I'll get it. I won't get nothing where I have to run down to Marquette to every store that sells sandbags and spend my money to try to save not only my house, but other houses in that neighborhood. I'm just asking for a little bit more look into that. I get up on that railroad grade on my four-wheeler, and there is a standing pool back there right now, even with how dry it's been with the lack of snow, and we've had a couple of cold mornings. There's no skim ice on that puddle. It's open. So where is that coming from? That's a concern, because that didn't always happen. Now it's there.
Gotta wrap up, Todd, thanks. And he will take anybody around and show them. And Renell and I have both been there and had him show us in depth where some of the water is coming, and you can see it coming in the way he's talking about. Is there anybody else for public comment? Yes, go right ahead.
I'm Kathy Sylvester and I live at 410 East Division. I guess I had a question, and it's now with the force of the sewer that was backing up this spring and coming out of our toilet and up out of our floor drains, we are the last ones on the sewer line before it hits the main, 412 and 410. Now, I was wondering if with the force of the water being forced up through our floor drains and through our toilet in the basement, if that might be a contributing factor towards what was coming out of our sidelines going into the one into the alley. If just looking at the video or the pictures that you had, if the dirt and that was coming out of there may be what went into our sidelines this spring when we had the flooding. And in a way, it would be good to have a video done to see if it is our lines or if it's what's being forced into our lines during the flooding episodes. So was my thought on it, because we're the last ones on that side. Because everybody that is on the alley, that's where the line comes through, and we're the last ones before it hits the main on Division. So that was a concern of mine, and I would like to know myself, because if it's something on our property that we could fix, we would. But and that was just a thought of mine. I just thought it would be completely natural that the last two on a line would have the worst as far as what's going through. But especially when that line looked so bad before it had been jetted out and the vectors had gone through, you know, there's got to be something that's causing all of it to do it. So, and I thank you for all of the time and effort that all of you put in. At least you're trying to do something for us, and I really do appreciate it.
Ma'am, I would like to say that I think that's part of this next step, is that scoping your laterals would help, because if you have a break or you have some potential for penetration, then there is potential. I don't know if your house has a backflow preventer. I don't know if that's been one of the ones that looked at that. You know, backflow preventers also help with some of the backwards pressure in the line. But, you know, we absolutely, with the council direction, have got the opportunity to come down and work with you to get that line scoped and understand that a little better for you.
Okay. Some good points made tonight, yeah. Is there any further public comment?
I gotta look at that.
Hearing none, is there anything else? Yeah, go ahead.
No
No.
attendees.
Is there anybody else from council that would like to say or add anything? Anybody?
Should we adjourn, Your Honor?
Okay. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.